Well, let's just get back to turning Canada to China before we go over to Rumble. So I was watching as much as the commission as I could today, and I'm hearing these things. It will end up on InfoWars. It will end up on InfoWars because it's the stuff of conspiracy theory, but they're saying it out loud and nobody's listening. And those who are listening, the ones that care, and the ones that have given up, well, what's the big deal? Then I just won't go to protests if the government can freeze my bank accounts if I'm there after they tell me to leave. Leave and desist. Oh, you're still here 2 days later? We're going to freeze your assets. And don't take my word for it. I don't know who the players are by name yet.
So, Gerard, you said that for people who were outside and who wanted to come back to Ottawa to have some fun and demonstrate, it could have been sufficient to say, well, if you come back or if you come, your bank account could be frozen.
Yeah, just like that.
Or your credit cards. For people who were already there, maybe not. And then how do we do to identify them? But if we had said, listen, someone will be there to ask the names of the people in some perimeter, and then we would have the list of all the people present at such a date, and if they're still there, 48 hours from now, we will give the order to financial institutions to block their assets or their bank account. Would that be acceptable, for example?
Let's just laugh, people. Let's just laugh as there's an open discussion about turning our country into China. And yes, Canada is still my country. Well, it was an emergency. You didn't leave after 48 hours? Well, let's just freeze all your bank accounts. Oh, it's so funny. That's an open discussion that they're having. If people are protesting and you tell them to go home and they don't, and then you can declare it an emergency and then freeze their bank accounts. And they go, I mean, the thing is, I'm listening to this off my phone and I have to try to make you can't rewind, by the way, off the commission website. So I have to record endlessly just so I can capture these moments when they happen. And I mean, there was more context to this. Like, I have a feeling that I might want to stream this all day so I can rewind it on YouTube. They are literally saying, well, if it's an emergency, and people show up to protest after they're told not to go, well, then we can freeze their bank accounts. Is that what problems do we see with that, Bernard? Let me ask you the question to field it from here. Oh, and then listen to this. So while they're just casually talking about, no due process because it's an emergency, no legal standards because it's an emergency, no checks and balances because it's an emergency. Where the hell is it? I had the follow-up. I had the answer to it. Maybe I didn't get the answer. Is this the answer? This might have been the answer here. Oh, this is another one. Just listen to this one.
If you have foreign entities, I assume if there is a crowdfunding platform somewhere in the world, or a crypto exchange, or a crypto wallet service, whatever they call themselves, you don't necessarily know or even care who's your clients, right? Especially if where you're physically located, at least legally, there is no requirement for, know your clients information. You may not know that, this person's from Canada. You may not even know that you have technically, now that you have someone who has put money on your platform or donated money to your platform or is going to receive money from your platform, that you should be registered. So first of all, it's very difficult for an entity like FinTrack to actually scour the world to find out.
They're talking about requiring you to register if you take or accept foreign funds.
The second thing is, even if that were possible, say, hey, you're not registered, so now you have to register. And then,
who's this going to apply to? Commentators who might get crowdfunded?
Platform, crowdfunding, crypto is not registered. Then what? What happens? Does FinTrack say,
freeze their bank
accounts?
Registered,
you're not complying, we're going to shut you down? Well, that's not going to happen, especially if that platform is not in Canada. They can't really do that.
Can't shut them down. But what can they do? What can they do? Bill C-11? Anybody?
Can you block a website? Like
Yes.
An actual IP address
Yes.
from this platform, say now Canadians no longer have access to that?
Have we heard of Bill C-11, sir?
Is that, and is that possible, or what is the process for doing that? And then
It's not only possible. What is the process? It's in the process right now. Regulate the internet the way the government regulates television and radio under Bill C-11.
even if you could do that, then what? Isn't there this platform might just say, okay, well, now we're blocked here. We'll just create another IP address where people can go and do the same business they were doing before. And then you have to go through the whole process. And this kind of cat and mouse. So the big question is, even if we want to have this level of registration, disclosure, transparency, compliance, is it even possible, feasible? So I see Michel, who's now kind of wants to say a lot of things.
Is it even possible? There is nothing that the government will not say is possible, is not possible if it allows them to have more powers. They're literally talking about passing Bill C-11 right now, which would regulate the internet, which would downgrade, demote certain content that is undesirable. It might even allow blocking or restricting access to certain content. Who is it? I don't know the guy's name, but these are the panelists on the commission discussing policy. I don't know who it is by name or reputation. I didn't know this was going on today, and I wasn't planning on getting involved in it. But then someone, luckily in a comment, told me, like, Viva, did you know that they're broadcasting this and they're sitting around talking about turning Canada into China, and it's shocking? I wanted to bring up one of the answers, but I don't seem to have it. Give me 2 seconds. It was the answer to the first question. And wait until you hear the answer. I'm going to give myself an L, sir. That's not the. Oh, that might have been the answer. Yeah, here's the answer. Okay, got it. Good. Get it? Got it. Good. And then after this, we're going to move over to Rumble. Everyone here, here's the link to Rumble. It's pinned in the top. It's pinned, people. Go start. You can make your way over there if you're so inclined to support over on Rumble. Please, thank you. Okay, here we go. Listen to this. This was the answer. People, the guy might have a speech impediment, so don't make fun of the speech impediment. That discredits legitimate criticism. Listen to the words, not the delivery of the words. And the words are horrifying.
We would have the list of all the people present at such a date.
Here, this is when they're talking about freezing bank accounts.
48
We'll get a list, you see. And if the people who we got on the list have not left the protest after whatever time the government says the protest comes to an end, we can then go tell their banks to freeze their accounts. That's the question.
hours from now, we will give the order to financial institutions to block their assets.
We will give the order as if this is now just like a tool in the box. This is unlawful, unconstitutional. You have courts for a reason. Freezing a bank account, you can get by way of a Mariva injunction. Freezing a bank account, you can get through the ordinary courses of due process. But now, Trudeau has broken the seal, the proverbial seal. He's shattered the glass. Now, they can talk about issuing an order to freeze bank accounts in the absence of a conviction, in the absence of charges, in the absence of any due process. It's within their purview now, just because it's been done once.
Or their bank account. Would that be acceptable, for example? Well, I will answer in English because I want to be as precise as possible.
Yeah, be precise, please.
Well, is it okay? Let's in times of crisis.
Look at how happy these people are. They're sitting around discussing other people's lives and livelihoods, like they're the philosophers of our time. Listen to the answer. In times of crisis.
Is it okay? Let's in times of crisis, traditional rules of procedural fairness can be modified. We have to accept that.
Modify. We can modify traditional rules of fairness. In times of crisis is when traditional rules of fairness need to be fortified, not modified.
Always have gold-plated.
You know why? because then it just incentivizes the government to call crisis whenever it wants to modify traditional rules of fairness. Wrong. Ass backwards, carriage in front of the horse. Times of crisis is when you make sure the rule of law, fundamental rights are respected, not modified.
We have to accept that we can't always have gold-plated process going on here. So in that sense, to some extent, a hammer is, I'm not completely opposed to it. Where I think it becomes more problematic.
By the way,
because
the previous question, they were talking about using a hammer to kill a fly, a sledgehammer to kill a fly, where one of the panelists, who seems to have half a constitutional brain to her, said, it's not because something was effective that it becomes justified. You know, you can kill the cancer by killing the patient. It's not because it was effective at killing the cancer that it's justified or the proper course of action. You can use a sledgehammer to kill a fly, but because it managed to kill the fly doesn't mean it was the proper justifiable method. You can use a hammer to kill a sledgehammer to kill a fly, but it doesn't really work. You know the analogy. But the fly swatter was the appropriate response. This guy here says,
I'm not completely opposed to it. Where I think it becomes more problematic is how did the banks know whose accounts to freeze?
Well, the government tells them.
And if they felt they made a mistake, like what sort of disincentive is there on the
None.
bank to not do it? How do they know the person didn't leave? The fact that there wasn't a centralized authority is a little bit of a problem as well here.
Centralized authority. They want to make a bank freezing czar of the government as the centralized authority to, tell the banks, you're good, you can do it.
The fact that there was no challenge after the fact is a bit of a problem as well. Like going only for efficaciousness, this may very well have been efficacious, and therefore, in some cases, I'm not going to argue that it wasn't efficacious or that it wasn't even justified in particular situations. I think the problem arises, as you noted, it was implicit in your question, that we don't know how the banks made this decision. We don't know if the banks did it with someone who actually got the message and left. And that's where the lack of any individual protection is a bit problematic. And look, in an emergency, some of this is someone's going to fall through the cracks. But the lack of any
for the greater
kind of
good.
ability to challenge, the lack of any kind of way to say, no, I left, I got the message, and the bank had no incentive to accept it. Like the person could go into their bank account in Toronto and say, look, I'm back, but
I'm good, forgive me. Forgive me,
or had no incentive to take it off per se. That's where I think it becomes slightly more problematic.
That's where it becomes problematic. Not in doing it. It becomes problematic where the bank doesn't undo it afterwards. Forget about the fact that it might affect someone's credit at large. It's happening before our eyes for us to see, but people are too busy with their daily lives. It's not everybody who has the luxury, or I will say the burden, of doing this day in and day out. I sit there listening to this, pulling my hair out, getting my stomach in knots. But other people don't have time. They have real jobs. They have as much family as I do. They have as much obligations as I do. And they don't have time to know about it, and they barely have time to care about it if they do. What's my purpose here? Hey, you can't say the information was not there. As the ship is sinking, it's on fire. The fact that you're sleeping with earplugs, I guess you can't say that you didn't have access to the information for now, and pretty soon you might not actually have access to the information.